Vice Chair Zions, can I do a mic check, please?
You're on a loop. Something's wrong with sound.
We are working
That's
through our
better.
technical issues.
Testing.
Test 1 2.
Something's unusual with the sound.
Test 1 2. Is it broadcasting?
Better.
Confirm we're not hearing an echo.
Testing here. Everyone can hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, Peter.
Good morning. How you feeling, Jeff?
I felt better. I'll tell you that.
Okay, folks, we are going live. I'd like to welcome, the time is 10:01, and the date is Wednesday, December 21, and I welcome, this is the full commission meeting, Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. I would look for a motion to approve well, do we need to do a roll call? No, we're fine. So I'd look for a motion to approve the commission agenda.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Giraldo. I'll take the second by Vice Chair Presley. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, Mr. Adams, can you call the roll?
Chair Shapiro,
Yes.
Commissioner Bailey,
Yes.
Commissioner Dorner,
Aye.
Commissioner Giraldo,
Aye.
Commissioner Washington,
Aye.
Vice Chair Zients,
Aye.
Commissioner Branson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hill,
Aye.
Commissioner Pinheiro,
Aye.
Commissioner Presley.
Aye.
That is 10. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item is approval of commission minutes. We have approval of commission minutes from both the open session of November 16, 2022 and the closed session of November 16, 2022. Any discussion? Looking for a motion.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I was hoping we could pull the closed session minutes and just approve the open session minutes at this time.
We can certainly do that. Is this something that we need to be discussing? We're going into closed session. Can we take it up there? How do you want to handle it?
Ms. Borden, should we do it in closed session or?
Is it appropriate to just do
well,
that
I
closed
think-
session?
I think that we can just explain that we can approve the closed session minutes at your next meeting. We want to hold them because they were dealing with collective bargaining, and the vice chair would like more detail in the minutes. And in order to do that, we need to make sure that the collective bargaining is done. We can't put that level of detail in there until the bargaining with the unit is done. So we're happy to do that, but we would need to hold the minutes until the next meeting.
That's fine from my perspective, commissioners. We'll just, there's nothing that requires us to approve the minutes at this meeting, so we can just hold off until the next one. So then what is before us is just the approval of the open session commission meeting minutes from November 16, 2022. Is there a motion to approve?
Mr. Chair, just a point, a clarification point. I was absent from that meeting, so I
Okay.
cannot vote.
All right, so you won't be voting. And Commissioner Hill, you were making a motion?
Yes, I move that we approve the open session meetings from November 16th and defer the closed session meetings of the same date.
Second. No, we don't want to approve the closed session meetings on the same day.
Right, I said defer.
Oh, thank you. I didn't hear it correctly.
That's all right.
Thank you.
So we have the motion by Commissioner Hill. The second was Commissioner Giraldo. Was that right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So that's a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Mr. Adams, please call the roll.
Chair Shapiro,
Vote yes.
Commissioner Bailey,
Yes.
Commissioner Dorner,
I'll abstain since I was absent also.
Commissioner Giraldo,
Vote aye.
Commissioner Washington,
Aye.
Vice Chair Zients,
Aye.
Commissioner Branson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hill,
Aye.
Commissioner Pinheiro,
Abstain?
Commissioner Presley.
Aye.
That's 8 in favor, 2 abstentions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on our agenda, these are general announcements. You see a number of different items on the announcements that were included in our packet. I have nothing to elaborate on these, but if there's anything that any commissioner wishes to ask questions about or refer to, feel free. Otherwise, we will move on to item 4 on our agenda. This is board reports. We have, this is an item for information only as well. The Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Executive Committee was dissolved per Resolution 22-39. And help me to understand, the Employee Retirement Association Board of Trustees regular meetings, this is just for information only, correct? Okay, right. I'm having fun with this screen. Does other people see what I see here?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Look, yep, we're in the woods.
I feel like this is a scene from the movie Pitch Perfect, and it's not going to go well, but okay, all right. That's fine. So nothing else to do here. These are just information items. Now we're going to go to the items 5A through E. These are action and presentation items. Oh my God, this is so amusing. First one is Resolution 22-42. This is the adoption of the Montgomery County Thrive Master Plan. We have Mr. Afzal who's going to present on this item.
Mr. Chairman, for resolution items, and typically it is an up or down vote unless commissioners have questions.
Okay, so there's no presentation. Any questions on this resolution item? Seeing none, I would look for a motion.
Move approval.
Got a first, don't have a second.
Second.
The motion was made by Commissioner Giraldo, second by Vice Chair Bailey. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Mr. Adams, if you could call the roll.
Chair Shapiro?
I vote aye.
Commissioner Bailey?
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner?
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo?
I vote aye.
Commissioner Washington?
Aye.
Vice Chair Zients?
Aye.
Commissioner Branson?
Aye.
Commissioner Hill?
Aye.
Commissioner Pinero?
Aye.
Commissioner Presley?
Aye.
Motion passes 10-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item is Resolution 22-43. This is the adoption of the Commission FY24 proposed annual capital and operating budgets. Mr. Kroll is here to answer any questions that we might have, unless, Mr. Kroll, there's something that you need to bring to us before we consider action on this?
There is not. You have my staff report. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to elaborate.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kroll. Commissioners, if there's no questions or comments on this, then I'd look for a motion.
Move approval, Mr. Chair.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Giraldo, a second by Vice Chair Presley. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Mr. Adams, if you could call the roll.
Chair Shapiro?
Vote aye.
Commissioner Bailey?
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner?
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo?
Vote aye.
Commissioner Washington?
Aye.
Vice Chair Zients?
Aye.
Commissioner Branson?
Aye.
Commissioner Hill?
Aye.
Commissioner Pinero?
Aye.
Commissioner Presley?
Aye.
10-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item is Resolution 22-45. This is the adoption of the Montgomery County Uniform Standards for Mandatory Referrals. We have Mr. Mills, who can answer any questions that we might have on this item. And if there are no questions, then I would look for a motion on this item as well.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of Resolution 22-45, adoption of the Montgomery County Uniform Standards for Mandatory Referrals.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Mr. Adams, please call the roll.
Chair Shapiro?
Vote aye.
Commissioner Bailey?
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner?
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo?
I vote aye.
Commissioner Washington?
Aye.
Vice Chair Zients?
Aye.
Commissioner Branson?
Aye.
Commissioner Hill?
Aye, I'm sorry, I was muted.
Commissioner Pinero?
Aye.
Commissioner Presley?
Aye.
10-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next two items are not action items. First of these two is the 5D. This is the Audit Committee and Office of the Inspector General Annual Report. We'll start with Ms. Bailey. Vice Chair Bailey, for for the audit committee presentation. Then we'll turn to Ms. Kenny for the OIG annual report. Ms. Bailey.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and other commissioners. We do have, or you should have in your hands, the report from Ms. Kenny and the commission, the audit commission members. It's a very comprehensive report, and we thank her, Ms. Kenny and Renee and her team for this report, and would hope that each of you have had an opportunity to peruse the report. And if you have any questions, we are available to answer questions regarding the report. Let me just highlight a few of the items in the report. As I said, it is extremely comprehensive and very, very well done. And I certainly want to thank the staff for that. In the report, you will see that they've completed the performance audit. They handled issues around fraud, waste, abuse investigations. They did management advisories, and there's several audit recommendations. You will also find in the report the major audit findings and reviewed recommendations during the follow-up, and the information regarding internal fraud courses that were taught. Please take a minute to go through, not just a minute, it's going to require a little more than that, but please take the time to go through the report. There's a lot of information that's extremely useful to all of us. There's an item on the process that the audit committee, that the auditor used throughout. There's the planning, the field work, the reporting, and the follow-up reviews. There might be some items that you're professionally interested in, such as the take-home vehicles, the sick leave bank, the Montgomery County Maintenance Yard. She looked into issues surrounding that, and items within Prince George's County as well. So if there are any questions, we're available to answer any of those questions, but please do take time to go through the very comprehensive report. That concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for the audit committee report. And it is thorough, and it speaks to all the hard work that's been done and the excellent professional work that's been done through the Office of the Inspector General. Are there any questions for Ms. Bailey and for the audit committee?
Well, this is Renee Kenny, Inspector General, for the record. I'd like to make just one clarification. In the package, there are two separate reports. The audit committee is required by commission practice to issue an annual report. So there is a audit committee activity report, which is 4 pages long. And then there's also an annual report that my office puts out, which Commissioner Bailey touched on the highlights. So I just want to clarify there are two reports.
I appreciate that,
Thank you,
Ms.
Ms. Kenny.
Yeah, thank you very much. And my plan was, if there's something that you wish to present after, if there's no further questions from Ms. Bailey, I was going to turn to you to talk about the annual report, if there's anything that you want to add on that as well.
I'm available to walk through it and any level of detail required.
If you wanted to come in, this is a stupid question.
Hold on one second.
What,
if we could ask folks who aren't speaking to mute their microphones, please.
In terms of building access.
Okay, take it away, Ms. Kenny.
Well, I will start. If I get too much in the weeds, please let me know. I will share my screen because I have the report up.
A 7 o'clock schedule.
And I would say, I mean, Ms. Kenny, we have the information, and I mean, I would be helpful for me to at least have a brief overview of it, but maybe it's more a question of after a brief overview, we'll just see if there are questions from commissioners.
Okay, great. So the highlights Commissioner Bailey touched on, these are everything that we did in the last fiscal year. I will jump through this part. It's all governance, and it talks about my team, our certifications, the standards. I'll jump through that because I'm sure you guys are more interested in the actual work that was done. There's a slide on the audit process. So in fiscal year 22, we completed 9 performance audits. 6 of those audits covered processes, take-home vehicles, exempt overtime, sick leave bank, ACH and direct deposit, Montgomery County maintenance yard, the controlled assets, those are assets under $10,000. And we looked at the CWIT and enterprise project plan. We also completed 3 facility audits. And when we complete a facility audit, we look at all operations within the facility. So we did SARC, Good Luck Community Center, and Cabin John Ice Rink. But when we're in there, we look at petty cash, purchase cards, cash receipts, vehicle usage, everything that all of the operating processes within a facility. In our performance audits, we had 4 major audit concerns. I did want to take the time to at least let the commission know what constitutes a major audit concern. Each one of our audit recommendations is either assessed as a high risk, medium risk, or low risk. And we have guidelines we follow, but it does depend a lot on our professional judgment when we're assigning the various risk ratings. But we also have a section in the beginning of the audit reports that identifies any major audit concerns. We put that there because this is, I know sometimes managers and everybody gets very busy. This way they could turn to that page and they can see if there's anything that needs addressing. So out of all of our audits, there were 4 major audit findings. The first had to do with take-home vehicles. There are 33 employees, commission employees, that are have take-home vehicles. These are vehicles that are assigned to them, and they keep them in their homes. 3 employees did not have an assignment form. I do want to clarify that that is just an administrative finding. All of the 3 individuals were definitely authorized to have the vehicles. And there were 12 employees that were not maintaining complete mileage logs. We identified that as a major audit finding. We had we identified the administration of controlled and capital assets at SARC as a major audit finding. We're finding this is pervasive in a lot of our audits. My team will be addressing department heads at the next department head meeting. We're going to have a nice conversation on the internal controls to protect the commission's controlled assets. The reason SARC was identified as a major audit concern is that we did a walkthrough 9 months prior to the audit and gave management a heads up of what we were expecting and what was required. And we felt there was a lack of oversight or disregard. So we put that as a major audit finding. We looked at the controlled assets in Montgomery County maintenance yards. We actually went out and tried to do inventories at 25 maintenance facilities. We found a significant amount of issues. And we also looked at the CWIT process. And although the steering committee was getting monthly updates on the projects, we determined they didn't have all of the information necessary to help them make good financial decisions. So those were our major audit concerns. We did 6 fraud, waste, and abuse investigations. 4 of the 6 resulted in a conclusion of either fraud, waste, and abuse. There's a definition of fraud, waste, and abuse in the report, just high level. If we have questions on the investigations or any personnel matters, I recommend that it be held in closed session, but we did have personal use of a facility. We had falsification of time cards. This was when everyone was working 100% teleworking and an individual had a second job which overlapped with their commission schedule. We did, there was some waste that we found. This is number 3. Manager was not providing adequate oversight. There was resulted in misrepresentation of time worked. The manager failed to ensure that annual inventories of material was completed, and the manager failed to ensure that the assets were secured or locked. So we put that as we found that in one of our investigations, and we also looked we did find a conflict of interest with a contractor who also had a consulting firm. We did 6 memorandums of limited investigation. As most know, the OIG administers a fraud hotline. So between the fraud hotline and direct calls by managers, employees, and even our constituents, we get a lot of allegations raised of possible fraud, waste, and abuse. So we always start with a limited investigation that might include maybe some interviews, looking at some documents, doing an initial assessment to see if a fraud, waste, and abuse investigation should be opened. So we did do 6 additional limited investigations that did not result in a fraud, waste, or an abuse investigation. We did 1 management advisory. This was at the request of the executive director and the corporate HR
Ms. Kenny,
director.
Ms. Kenny, can you hold on one sec? I
Yes,
see
sir.
Mr. Dorner has hand up. Do you want to ask the question now, or can it wait till she's completed? And actually, I see.
No, it's actually on this page. I was just gonna putting myself in the queue.
Okay. All right. And same thing for you, Mr. Hill. You're in the queue.
Yes, let her finish her report.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Ms. Kenny.
Right. They asked us to look at the commission's process for employee life insurance, the enrollment. We took a look at it. We made some recommendations. They've been implemented, and the process is much better and much more inclusive. It was a great advisory, and I think it benefited the commission significantly. Appendix A, I'm not going to go through it, but this is our 9 performance audits. Give you some additional reading. I listed every single recommendation that we had in our performance audits, so you can get a sense. Appendix B was pulled out. There's questions, we can talk about it in closed session. So that is the report. I can stop sharing and answer questions. Well, I'll leave it up in case someone has a question on it, but that concludes my report, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Kenny. Thank you for the report. Start with Commissioner Joyner.
Let me actually defer to Mr. Hill because I wasn't the first one to raise my hand. I think he had raised his hand first.
Okay. Thank you for that. I apologize. Commissioner Hill.
That's okay. This is a general process question, which is, did I hear correctly that you said you had given a 9-month lead time notice to a facility that you're going to audit?
It is not our practice to do that generally. We do not do that. This was an exception, as this was a brand new facility, brand new management, brand new, it wasn't open. So we, as a courtesy, we did a walkthrough. One of my assistant inspector generals, Ms. Beckwith, did a walkthrough at the facility. We also, there was a slide in there, we do training. Ms. Beckwith does our fraud, waste, and abuse training. One of our strong philosophies is we want our audit clients to be informed and know the internal controls and know what's expected. We don't get paid per audit finding. We love to go in and have clean audits. We don't see it that often. But that wasn't an exception because it was a brand new facility, and it was more of trying to make sure that the new management had a good understanding of what was required from an audit standpoint, internal controls with a facility.
Okay. What is the general practice if this was the exception?
When we do a facility audit, we will show up unannounced and do a petty cash count. And after we do the petty cash count, we send out an audit notification to the management, letting them know we will be kicking off a facility audit. For all of our other audits, for process audits, we do send out an audit notification. We have an opening meeting with the management and the key personnel in the process to help us get a better understanding of the risks. It helps us develop our audit program.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Dorner.
Yeah, I have 2 questions on this page on the management advisory, particularly number 4. Yeah, right there. On the low enrollment, the basic life insurance. So I think it's pretty well known in like behavioral psychology that if you have to opt out versus opting in, there's a lot different kind of take up rate. So I think by adjusting and making this a basic benefit, that was probably a good choice to get higher participation. But I wanted to ask, one, is this automatic benefit an actual charge? Because that's not detailed here nor in the appendix. I don't know if we're just deducting something out of employees' salaries that they may have opted out of specifically. And then two, did we actually reach out to them to find out why people weren't signing up? Because we may have overinsured some folks that might have insurance through spouse or other dependents that didn't necessarily need insurance that we didn't necessarily need to pay for.
I am going to have to ask for some assistance in answering that question from either Mr. Spencer or Ms. McDonald, if she's available. I do know that the cost is extremely inexpensive. I don't know exactly, I can't quote the exact cost, but I believe it's less than $2 a pay period to be covered. And so, and I do know that the HR did do quite a bit of work and reach out to the employees before they changed the process to automatic enrollment.
Do we have Ms. Chang, our Executive Director, Ms. Chang Smith is here. She might be able to help answer this if Mr. Spencer and Ms. McDonald aren't here.
For the record, this is Asantha Chang Smith, Executive Director. The corporate HR team rolls up to me, so I am familiar with this issue. We did see that there was less than 1/3% of our employees who were enrolled. The Inspector General is right. It was only about $2 per person to enroll per month. So we decided that that would be a benefit we would offer and people would have to opt out. And I will tell you that, it's a lot more cost effective. This decision, as you may recall, Commissioner Dorner was made at the height of the pandemic and post-pandemic, when we were seeing people who would perish because of COVID, and a number of our employees who had passed because of COVID did not have this life insurance, and it was very heartbreaking for us, for our commission family, and for the families of those that had passed. So we really took this to heart, and as you recall, the commissioners agreed on this provision, and we've moved forward. And since then, and we've also talked to the unions about this as well, because we know that FOP in particular, sometimes they have additional insurance or there are insurances offered through the union. So we did talk to the union specifically. But a lot of folks just, when they signed up for benefits, they just really didn't think about it. They were more concerned about health insurance, and they weren't really thinking about life insurance. And so this really covers folks for something that, again, insurance is for something you don't anticipate. Nobody anticipates on dying prematurely. But this was something that we thought at low cost we could offer for all our employees. And there is an option, of course, to waive out of the insurance.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question. I appreciate it.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Kenny? Seeing none, I want to thank the Audit Committee Chair, Ms. Bailey, and Ms. Kenny for all the work this year. Appreciate it. And if there's no further questions, this is an information item only, so there's no action, and we'll move to the next item on our agenda. This is item 5E, the plan and... Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I typically do not attend closed session, and I am not going to attend this closed session to talk about the exhibit unless my presence is requested.
Commissioners, anyone requesting Ms. Kenny's attendance on that? I don't see anybody, Ms. Kenny, so I think you're fine. Okay, thank you, and happy holidays. Next, we have the Plan Integration Tool. This is the National Center for Smart Growth who will be presenting. and I will turn it over to them. I'm not sure who the representative will be from National Center for Smart Growth, but I'll have them introduce themselves. I think this item is, they're scheduled to take about 15 minutes to present this tool that they have developed that's taken on some of our work. So I'll turn it over to the folks from the National Center for Smart Growth. Are you all on the line? Let me check with staff to see if anybody's on the line. If not, then this will just be an information item that you will have in your packet.
I did see that Mr. Nick Finio was on the line.
Mr. Finio, are you on the line? If you are, you're muted if you're talking. Nope.
Is he,
Going once, going twice.
Saw him in. He is in the. Mr. Finio, you are unmuted. You are muted.
Let's give us a second, folks. We'll try to see if we can work out this technology issue.
I made him a.
Mr. Chair, I suggest we defer this item maybe in the agenda, come back to it.
Yep, he's.
Thank you, Commissioner. We unfortunately we we do have a few more items. So let's take that advice. Thank you very much, and we will move. We'll come back to this if he figures out the technology. Let's move to the officers' reports and see if we have anything that is going to be taken up. I'll start with the Executive Director, Ms. Chang-Smith. Do you have a report for us beyond what's in the packet?
Chair Shapiro, no, this is for information only.
Okay. We do not have a report scheduled by our Secretary-Treasurer. And in terms of the General Counsel, Ms. Borden, do you have a report for us in addition to what you have provided, the litigation report that you have provided in the packet?
I am happy to, again, this is Deborah Borden, General Counsel. I'm happy to give a brief and very general update as to where we are with the bills that we are expecting in the General Assembly. We're not very far along. The session hasn't actually started yet, but we have started meeting with delegation members, particularly in Montgomery County, due to the bills that have been proposed so far. I can tell you those.
Why don't you take a few minutes and give us just a brief overview of where we are? I think it'd be helpful for all the commissioners to hear.
Okay. So we have a bill known as the Task Force Bill. We're very used to our task force bills here at the Commission. This task force bill has been proposed by Senator Ben Cramer. He is proposing that a task force be convened to look at removing the Montgomery Parks Department and the Montgomery Planning Department from the Commission. Just taking it out and putting it into Montgomery County government. This proposal is not new. This has happened before, quite a few times in the history of the Commission, where someone, whether it's the county council, county executive, or a member of one of the delegations, has proposed removing some part of the Commission and putting it under county government. We are working with the members of the delegation to give them information about what the Commission is, what it does, what our mission is, and frankly, how successful we have been over the past 100 years. And so the commissioners, the team, the legislative team, which included the department directors, Tanya Stern and Mike Riley, we have appeared before the delegation and given public testimony. We've given written testimony, and then we appeared at their work session, which was this week, just a couple of days ago. So the bill has been held. It has not been voted upon yet, but the sequence will be after the new year. delegation, Montgomery delegation, will take a vote whether to advance the bill. Then it must go to the Prince George's delegation, which must vote to then advance the bill, and then it would go to committee in the General Assembly for review. So it has a long way to go. We have explained to folks that we really don't think this bill is necessary. We think this study or this subject has been studied quite a few times in the past, and really nothing has changed in the sense that we feel that the cost is going to be prohibitive to actually do this, and that the benefits are going to be very, very small, because that's what every other study has said over the years. So we are working on that, and we will keep you updated about that. The other thing that is sort of top of mind right now is called the Transparency Bill. The Transparency Bill is also proposed by Senator Kramer. It would do two major things. The first thing would be to change the way that the Montgomery Planning Board chair is appointed. It would remove that from the county council and give it to the county executive. And the second part of the bill really deals with talking about what commissioners can and cannot do. And it is just confined to Montgomery County commissioners, but it talks about things like they can't run for office while they're on the board. They can't campaign for other people who are running for office while they're on the board, things like that. So we have not taken a position on this, mostly because of the first part, because we don't want to get into the middle of the battle between the county council and the county executive. That's not a good place for us to be. And so we haven't taken a position, but we have provided lots of information about the second part of the bill that would sort of affect our operations, because there are other things in there, things about posting of agendas, things about summarizing documents that the planning board looks at, time frames, things like that. So we certainly have a lot to say about those things because those are operational. So we are monitoring that and working with the delegation on that very closely. The other bill is a collective bargaining bill. It is a bill that would require for out of cycle bargaining that we go to binding arbitration. If you remember, last year we had a disagreement with one of our unions about that very issue, and they went to court because we did not agree that binding arbitration was required by law at the mid-cycle negotiations, that it's only required when you're negotiating a new contract. And so we won on that issue, and now the union is supporting this effort to unwind that win through legislation. So we're working on that very closely. We have opposed that bill, and we will work with the sponsor to see if we can't come to some compromise. The fourth bill is just focused on the partisan issue. So when planning board members are appointed, there is a rule that not more than 3 can come from one political party. And there is a proposal out there to eliminate that requirement. There's a feeling that for Prince George's and Montgomery County, the partisan issue is not really a planning board issue because the partisan issue doesn't really tell you anything about how that person feels about development, about pedestrian safety, about smart growth, or really any of the things that we deal with as planning board members. So there is there are a number of people who think that it's time to do away with that. And so again, we've taken no position on that, but we have provided information, and we continue to provide information to the sponsor and to the other members of the delegation on that. So we don't have any idea whether all of these or any of these will make it to committee at this point. When we get that information, we'll certainly update you and let you know. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Borden. Questions for Ms. Borden related to this legislative action? Commissioner Branson, you have your hand up.
Yes, I have a question. Have any of the bills you've mentioned, is there indication that there will be sponsors from the other body? So if it was introduced in the Senate, or if it's likely to be introduced in the Senate, is there any indication that someone from the General Assembly, from the House, will introduce it? Has that happened with any of the bills?
Not yet.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hill.
Yes, I want to just go to the report that you mentioned by reference, and I just have a detail on there I wanted to probe, which is it seems to me the tort claims seem to be high, and that may just be my experience with this. But I was wondering, without asking for any detail about the cases, is there something particular that's causing tort claims to spike? And do we have a vulnerability that we may want to be addressing?
Well, it's interesting. I'm glad you read the report. Thank you so much. But it's interesting that you should say that. We noticed that when the pandemic hit, we saw a real blip, a real increase in tort claims. And I'm not really sure why that is. We sort of joked about it a little bit that, people are, they're either working from home and then looking for things to do, recreational things to do. And our facilities were always open during the lockdown and during all of that time, and that we were just getting a lot more patronage, and that, the people were coming in and falling over. But we don't know exactly why that is. We did notice it. And we don't necessarily think that it's specific to any facility, because we do look for trends of that nature. We look for if it's specific to, particular employees that are involved. And we haven't seen any of those types of trends. It's been an across the board increase in our tort claims. And so we have noticed it, and we have been keeping an eye on it, but we haven't noticed any patterns in the data.
Okay, it's just an observation that may be correlated to facility usage, and that makes sense. More usage, there's more problem for accidents. And it sounds like you're on top of it, so I just wanted to hear about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Branson. Oh, okay. That was an old
You're
hand.
on mute.
All right. No worries. Any other questions for Ms. Borden? Seeing none, thank you. This is information item only. Thanks for all the work. You'll keep us in the loop, I am sure, and enlist us as appropriate as we move along.
Yes, we will.
All right, thank you. Those are all of our regular agenda item. Folks, we are now going to be going into closed session based upon what action we take.
Chair Shapiro?
Huh?
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. The folks from National Center for Smart Growth, Mr. Finio, are you on?
Hey,
yes.
Everybody. I apologize for missing my turn a couple minutes ago. I had to step away from my desk for a phone call, but I'm here and
We're happy to have you, and now's the time. So if you could introduce yourself, Mr. Finio, any other members of your team, and my understanding is you've got about 15 minutes for a presentation for us, and we're looking forward to it. And take it away. Are we sharing screen, or are you going to be sharing screen to present this?
if you are able to share the PowerPoint, because I'm getting an error here, is that possible?
We're going to give it a try. Give us a minute. So, folks, give us a minute to see if we can figure out this technology issue. And Mr. Finio.
Yeah, and while we're doing that, I can introduce myself. So I'm Nick Finio. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Maryland at College Park, where I am the assistant director of the National Center for Smart Growth. Some of you may know my boss, Dr. Garrett Knapp. And I'm going to be talking about a technical project that we did over the last 2 years. That was the result of an FTA TOD planning grant for the Purple Line Corridor, which we worked on closely with both Montgomery County Planning Department and the Prince George's Planning Department. You may have also seen in the news that we recently got awarded another planning grant to go on for the next 2 years, sort of sequentially. Then we're going to continue to work with Montgomery and Prince George's County on that. So I can see that the PDF is up, so thank you for bringing that up, Jim. And we can just scroll right through to the next slide. So the NCSG, which I covered, we could skip this one. We're a research center at the University of Maryland. And I'm going to be talking about a little bit of an academic concept here, so bear with me, but we're talking about information systems of plans. It'll start to make sense in a few slides, I promise. So plans are documents that communicate intent, aspirations, or visions and possible actions in the face of uncertainty. And regulations are rights or incentives or constraints that are legally enforceable. So some assumptions as we think about plans. Plans are information that everyone can use the information in these plans, and plans aren't just made by government agencies, right? They're made by different actors at different times and different scopes. And they're used by different actors, different governments, different agencies, different for-profit, non-profit businesses as signals to coordinate their actions and understand what's coming next. So there's this universe of plans out there. Can scroll to the next slide. Thanks for zooming in. So in planning, we have a lot of tools that allow us to make plans, right? That assist with modeling or forecasting or evaluating change. But there are actually surprisingly few tools out there that allow us to use the plans that we already have on the books. So accessing those plans other than just opening up a PDF or getting into the content of those plans as data. So what we're trying to do in this project is create a tool that allows us to use all of the existing plans. So next slide. So over time, this concept that I mentioned earlier, the information system of plans, has grown. So back in the pre-digital age, we had compendiums of plans, which were, basically just a binder with all the land use plans all stuck together, right? But starting about 15 years ago, there's been efforts in academia to build databases of plans. So take that plan content from multiple different plans and put it all into a database that you can search. And now we're able to interact with plans as data through a GIS interface that we built that's available on our website. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit in the next couple slides. So go ahead. So this is about building the plans and regulations information tool. Next slide. So since this was funded by the FTA, we built this plans and regulations information tool for the Purple Line Corridor, and we kind of stretched the Purple Line Corridor to be everything inside the Beltway in Montgomery County and then sort of the northern half of inside the Beltway in Prince George's County. And what we did with these interfaces that we built online was load a whole bunch of plan and regulation data into a GIS interface. So this is what you see when you open it up. Next slide. There's actually two tools. One will tell you about plans and one will tell you about regulations, and we'll get into some examples about that in the next couple slides. So plans are split into layers that you can search in the map by type. So you have sector plans, you have master plans, you have a range of different plans by different agencies in there. And then regulations are split into layers by regulations. So if there's a TIF district or if there's a parking district, you can see those layers on the map. And both plans and regulations have the spatial data and non-spatial attributes which can be described. And they're also linked to where you can learn more about the plan or the regulation in a geographic space. So next slide. So we focused on, when we're putting things into this map, our primary focus was getting government plans, but also plans from interest groups and government regulations, and especially regulations that can vary spatially. So a primary example of that is zoning, right? We want zoning to be in this map, but then also you want to be able to access the plans that regulate the zoning. So next slide. So here's a list of the kind of stuff that we're able to load into this tool. We're not just sticking with traditional land use plans. We've got all sorts of different, educational facility, infrastructure plans, regional plans, transportation plans. And then on the regulations, this is not just zoning, but sort of all the different polygons that we like to apply both locally or statewide, or nationally, such as difficult development areas from HUD or enterprise zones or parking districts as they're applied in the counties or school impact areas. So this interface allows you, this was, the real technical work that we had to do was a spatial query, right? So if you want to put in an address or click a point on the map, or even ask a more complicated question, like which plans apply within a mile of every Purple Line station in Montgomery County, you can use this tool to perform this query. So next slide. And then you can also filter the plans by selecting regulations based on their attributes, such as I want to know the new transportation plans adopted since 2010, or even what regulations or plans are currently being revised, because we have all these attributes coded in for the regulations and plans, so you can perform a filtered search. So it also has, I'm sure many of you have, there's tons of these tools at the state level, at the county levels in both counties, where you can access all these different plans. So this is a similar interface where you just see the geography of the plans, and you can click on and off layers and then click and see this sector plan here or this master plan in this area. So that capability is built in too. Next slide. And you can also do a combined search. So you can do something by geography and then by layer and also by the attributes. So you can do pretty powerful searches to find out what's going on in certain areas of interest. Next slide. So just some information. I think this PowerPoint was shared with everybody to explain when you go to the website. The link is also was shared with everyone. I think it's on the UMD National Center for Smart Growth website. Some explanation about the buttons that you can click and what you can do on here. Next slide. And you can also tell the GIS interface to produce a report. So you can have a PDF, if you do your query, I want to know all of the plans that are within 1 mile of this address, right? Maybe it's in Berwyn, like on that map there. And you can export that as a PDF. You can also export it in several different data formats, like a geodatabase. You can pull it in for analysis, or just a list in a CSV format. Next slide. So in the Purple Line corridor, we can talk about how we've applied this. So the Purple Line Corridor Coalition, which some of you may have heard of, is advocating for 4 goals: supporting housing choices for all, growing local business, building a thriving labor market, and supporting vibrant communities. Next slide. And the purpose of the tool was to provide easy access to the plans and regulations that we care about when we're building a sustainable transit-oriented corridor. We want to be able to have one place where we can go for a variety of use cases, and maybe that's for real estate development. Maybe it's for identifying affordable housing opportunities. Maybe it's for the planning staff to use, or it could even be for community advocacy. So local neighborhood associations or whoever can find all the different plans that apply to their area. So a use case, so why would we build something like this? It sounds pretty complicated, right? So the Purple Line Corridor Coalition created a housing action plan in 2019 that identified existing strategies for housing stability in the Purple Line corridor. So what's already on the books for getting affordable housing built in this area, and then what else do we need to do, right? So that's the planning part. So we had to dig through all the existing housing plans and regulations manually and find the different plans and think about what applied in Bethesda versus what applied in Langley Park. And then we engaged the housing and nonprofit community on what should be added into those plans to create these recommendations. So it was really useful to build this tool, which allowed us to do that, rather than manually finding all the different plans. Another use case would be the Capitol Trails Coalition. This coalition has developed a proposed network of over 800 miles of adding to our hard surface bike trails in the region. And one criteria was that each trail had to be identified in an existing plan. So the staff of the Trails Coalition had to go through these plans manually and find them. But if you have the plans and regulations tool, you would be able to search for all those trails and all the plans in those areas a little more easily. So some responses to this tool so far. We've shared this at our Makeover Montgomery conference. We shared it at the National APA conference. We've shared it with folks engaged in the Corridor Coalition. People like that it's cross-jurisdictional. You can easily, pin an address in Prince George's County and then pick up the plans that are right across the border in Montgomery County. It's online and it's pretty comprehensive. We've got all the plans in there. However, these online interfaces are, they're not easy to use when you're a novice user, and there could be more data in there. It's also hard to figure out who's using this and if they're using it, but it's on our website, and we think it's a pretty nifty tool. So next slide. So we're improving Parrot based on user feedback. We'd like to be able to scale beyond just the Purple Line corridor, but this does take a good deal of work to do, and we don't currently have funding to do that. It's not funded in the new FTA grant. And we'd like to be able to get more detailed by not just looking at the plan boundaries, but looking deeper into what's in the plans and pulling that content and making it searchable and part of the database too. So I think that's it. That's my last slide. And here are our email addresses. You can find the tool at umdsmartgrowth.org/tools and learn more about the Purple Line corridor there. And I see some hands popping up. Not sure if those questions are for me or.
I am sure they are. I'm sure the questions are for you. This was fascinating. So I don't know the order of who raised their hands first. I'll start with Mr. Hill, Commissioner Hill.
Yeah, boy, this is to some degree my professional field, so I've got lots of questions. Let me just cut that down to a couple. One is, it seems to me what we've got here is we've got a queryable database for geospatial indexing of plans. Is that a fair characterization?
I think that's accurate.
Okay. And I particularly note that this really kind of makes sense to me in terms of more and more of our plans are electronic and they don't have tangible elements, and it's a greater service through online servicing to be able to provide that. And the essential question that we're answering here is, what applies to me if I'm in a specific area, right?
Exactly.
In terms of burden, this would be another layer that we would have to establish in developing our plans of data that would go into the system, I presume. And I don't know what the metric for burden here, but what, for example, can you quantify how much effort it took to get the Purple Line into this database?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it took, so we do a lot of our work with our graduate students, right? And there were 2 graduate students who each worked on this for a full academic year, pretty much spending their 20-hour graduate assistantships doing it. And my academic colleague, Lou Hopkins, who is retired from the University of Illinois, you all may have heard of him. He wrote some books on plans, and this information system of plans stuff is it's his creation, right? So he was volunteering a lot of his time, as was Garrett Knapp and myself. So definitely a full-time staff person would be required to build something like this with advice and a lot of meetings with other people to kind of keep it alive.
I presume in your description, though, that you're describing really both the development of the product as well as the input of this particular use case, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so presumably it would be somewhat less than what you described, because once we've got it down and once we have the standard, you got someone that knows, what the tool needs and how to manipulate it, that it's not a year effort for a plan.
That's right. I think the architecture, and we've done, well, we attempted to do a great job of, preserving this architecture and, annotating how it was built. So adding in additional geographies or new, the Silver Spring master plan that was passed earlier this year is not coded in because it's kind of frozen in time, right, from when we finished. So adding a plan like that should be relatively easy.
Last question is sort of just a licensing or availability matter, which is, you've developed this in an academic research capacity. Are you expecting that this becomes a purchasable product, a licensed product from a foundation? What is there any thought about, if this were to be distributed and used, how that would go forward?
That's a good question. I mean, I think everything, our disclaimer that we put up there is everything that is here. We're basically just pulling publicly accessible information from everywhere else. And we had we're trying to advance the science here. So we did not have intent of, this product being, commercially sold.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Presley.
Yes, I am so enamored of this tool. I love it. The fact that you can extract data from the plans and eventually make it accessible to everyone is phenomenal. I wanted to know, you mentioned you can add different data sets. So would we be able to drill down, in the future using this tool to actually associate dates with plan elements that are supposed to be deliverable, whether by the county, DOT, whatever, these different elements that development has in some ways been contingent upon, so that we can track at any time where are we in what we planned and what's actually been delivered, whether it's a local park or a roadway,
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think that's sort of that next iteration that I was talking about. So I think the difference here is that what we have in the way that it's currently built is you can find every sector plan in Montgomery County, right? And you know where the boundary of that plan is, the year it was passed, and then you can link out and see the content of that plan. But what we haven't done is looked within the sector plan, and there's many different elements of those sector plans that talk about exactly what you were just saying: the park, the trail, the sidewalk, right? So that next step and coding that in, and then coding, did it happen, did it not happen, would take a level of effort that we were not able to prepare, but someone theoretically, I think, very much could.
Does anyone have any suggestion then as to how we could put this in line for funding for the future? Because I think this tool is, in my opinion, it's past due. I'm glad you're working on it, but what would you need to do to make a proposal to get funded to do this and roll it out?
Yeah, that is a great question. I think, I can talk to my boss, Dr. Knapp, about that. I think personally, my perspective, and this is not a solid perspective at this moment, is that something like this could very easily be embedded in the very technically competent and excellent GIS departments in either of the planning departments. They have the staff, they have, the full-time people. We're relying on students who constantly turn over. I'm a professor, I have to teach classes and do my own research, right? I can't, be building this tool as a contractor. So I think that is probably the way to go, but the university could certainly be involved in getting that off the ground. And you guys would have then the incentive to keep it updated, which we had one-time funding and we don't have the capacity to keep adding the plans in here.
And really then following on Commissioner Hill's questions, as he asked a lot of the things that I wanted to know, how would we go about ensuring that usage would not wind up being licensed back to the commission? So for example, if we were to find a way to put this on our own budgeting, what would we do to ensure that we're not funding something that is then sold and then we're going to pay to use it?
Yeah, that's a question I can't answer.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm sorry. I mean, I would love for the Joint Commission or even Montgomery County to take this up in the future as a board to see how something like this could get funded and go forward.
We'd be very happy to be a part of those conversations. Be very excited.
Fantastic work. I'm really, really pleased. Thank you.
Yep.
If I may, I think the university is using a lot of the layers that were already created in our GIS systems for roads, for parks, for zoning, for other facilities. And it does other things for sure that it doesn't sound, that I don't think our GIS guys are doing, but it's certainly a combination of their work. So we can talk about this more in our own board meeting.
Yeah, you are 100% correct that we were very reliant on the existing GIS infrastructure in both counties to get this data. You'd already digitized most of these plans. We're just compiling them into one spot.
Thank you. Commissioner Dorner.
Yeah, so let me say thanks for the presentation and for all the work on this. I have a team of like researchers and data analysts that we do mainly dashboards in Tableau, not as much in ArcGIS, but a lot of times we go back and forth with user experiences, and we're more quantitative data focused rather than spatial data focused. So I have sort of a couple comments on just design in terms of taking it a few next steps or levels kind of forward and sort of usability. And before I get into those though, and just based on questions from today, one thing you might want to think about is a capstone course for your undergrads or the honor students, where they might have like a local planning tool focus, and you could just split teams into like different sections of whatever you want them to do. If it's a dashboard or a specific part of the tools that you want them to develop, have them do that. And this could be something that they can market and that can go on their resumes for when they get out, that show like an actual product that they've improved and worked on. That could be very attractive to their next employers. Another thing to kind of think about is to open up some sort of a suggestion box in there, because I didn't see quite some way of an open source kind of way of flagging problems in the dashboard or things that just aren't as easy to use. And that might more quickly kind of get feedback from the community if you kind of go into the next layer of it. In the slides, just one thing to be careful of when you get your slides compiled up into other packets or other things, if you don't put www before a URL, it loses it in Adobe. So it'll usually get preserved across other Adobe products, but the link for your tool worked. The link for your, and this is on like the last slide that you had, the link for the umdsmartgrowth.org doesn't work because it doesn't have www before it. And I know it's a little bit annoying to put that, but just for marketability for yourself and for your, as you kind of go forward and do other presentations, I'd always do that just so you don't lose the ability to give somebody a live link, because then it just makes it one step harder for them to kind of get to it. In terms of the layers, I really like the Capitol Trails Coalition aspect of that. That's an amazing job of just providing the data to people, because we've had that kind of issue before where they come and they say, oh, we want to see where trails are being planned or what trails are existing and how we're getting to the sort of benchmark that we've been trying to achieve, and to have that in sort of a very visual spatial framework, I think is really, really useful for the public. One of the things is I was going onto the tool that you were just kind of previewing in there, that's like the main tool on your page, is that the data layers for the regulatory changes, I think, is unique, and being able to like click on and off the data layers to show how they've been changing over time. But the interactions between them is just not there yet. So there's no way of actually saying, okay, if I have single family homes in a particular zone and something that was passed in 2010, and then there's something that's passed in 2015, what's the change, or how do those spatial layers interact? There's just no way of doing it. And I realize that that's really hard to do from like a GIS standpoint, because you have to go in and figure out where they actually permitted within each zone. You have to code that up in some way, and then you have to figure out where they change. But some way of actually figuring out at least the most important aspects of maybe single family detached or single family attached, to see how they change over time. So if you were to be able to click on something or do sort of what would be essentially a spatial join across layers, like in ArcGIS, when you would take two layers and just join them together and look at their intersections, there's actually no way of logically doing that with zones to look at changes over time. And that's one of the more important features as you're looking and comparing across changes temporally, is to see how they actually impact. So how many of the zones have permitted or just outzoned in terms of not allowed single family zones in certain areas, or maybe multifamily zones or certain other uses. That's really one of the main things, is as you get to like the next step of, okay, you've been able to spatially put this into a GIS layer, but how do you actually use it? Like the spatial queries aren't really useful if you can't look at how things are changing over time and sort of permitted or not permitted uses. And I know that's hard going into the regulation, but that's really the next step, I think, in making this tool and envisioning something that you can actually use, and then thinking about how do you allow that to be a policy advocacy tool. That's really that next step of making that useful for the user, because you can't do that right now. One of the other things is you're clicking in on the layers, something that I don't know with the ArcGIS Online if it's possible from like a user standpoint, but figure out in the properties if you can allow people to adjust the order of the layers, because as you're layering up, I can't change where I want to be one on top of the other. So the purple line quarter is already over everything else just because it's higher up in sort of the legend or the selection tools. Whereas I might want it to actually be below, so I can have the purple line quarter and then I can show where the different zoning aspects of that purple line corridor cross the county by just turning them on or off. Right now, since it's on top of that, I have to actually turn it off, turn those other layers on, and then turn it back on to see are they inside or where they kind of located within there. And it might conflict with some of the color like transparencies and stuff like later on, but I think that would make it a little bit more visually kind of useful to see how they kind of layer up and turning things on and off. And then one of the other kind of things I do housing stuff. So when I saw the housing dashboard, I was excited to see if it used some of my data that I create at sort of like the federal level or kind of what it had on there. But it's kind of a little bit deceiving because it says housing dashboard on there. When you click on it, it's only multifamily. And really, it's not very good from a visual perspective. Like it's a bunch of dots on a map, which is like probably one of like the most basic things you can do in spatial layering, because you're just putting a dot on a map and you don't know if that dot represents a large area, a small area, kind of where it is. And when they overlap, they just kind of clump together. So figuring out a better visualization, I think, of that multifamily layer would be good. And then also just making it a little bit more obvious that it's only multifamily right now, and it could be single family. And I would actually kind of push you to the next level of kind of thinking about if you're going to put it in spatially, not just the location of the multifamily properties, but think about like census blocks or census tracts, because then you could say here's a percentage of one family like units of multifamily or two unit multifamily buildings within a census block. Because if this is going to like housing accessibility or equity or kind of dispersion across the county, you don't have any of that visually. Like when you look at that tool, all you have are a bunch of dots, but you can't visualize within a certain area how much is the percentage of availability of certain kinds of housing. You could do that if you were to just assign it and just join it down onto census tracts, load in the tracts for that, and actually have that as the spatial layer kind of below, and just have the average across tracts. You could do the same thing with single family homes, and then you could grab like the Tiger files from census, and you could have like the number of like single family homes that are of a certain size or have a certain number of bedrooms or whatever, and then you could compare that to multifamily as well. Then if you wanted to have the Tiger files and just use the public data, you could also bring in like other demographics, which right now aren't necessarily obvious on there. So you could kind of overlay maybe of like certain like income or certain like demographic shifts, whether it's like ethno-racial kind of stuff. What's the availability housing in those particular census tracts or those particular areas of the county? You could also do that with like the SDAT like files if you actually went in and were able to get all of their like spatial layers for that. But the census tract would probably be the census Tiger files would probably be the quickest way for you to build out that housing database on just public files without having to go through any sort of data request. So those are just some of my usability kind of comments. I didn't look at the tool a whole lot, like for an extensive period of time, but I just sort of was clicking around and looking at it, and just hope that those are useful and kind of making it the next level of usability for the public.
Yeah, I
Thank you. Good work.
Those comments, Will. I just probably do not have time to respond to all of them, but what I will say is I just put in the chat actually a link to a Google form where you can provide comments or just, you can email me. So that is actually linked on the website, that Google form, to provide feedback when you're using the tool. And I'm really excited to hear that you all are excited about this tool. Please, if you want to take this conversation further, please reach out to myself and my boss, Garrett Knapp, and we can talk about it. I will say that at this time, the tool is frozen in Amber. We do not have the time and the resources to make changes. But we are happy to have a conversation about taking it further with the commission. So thanks for the time, and hope you all have a good holiday.
Thank you.
Great.
Hold on.
Nick, just one other question.
Yeah, Nick, hold on one sec. We have a few more questions.
Oh, we do.
Just one other comment on the Google form. I would switch that over to UMD or something if you can, because federal employees can't access Google products on their work computers. So if you get somebody from like Census who finds this or somewhere else, they're not going to be able to actually email you probably. Because they have to go to like secure browsers that actually allow them to do it. Because a lot of times it gets locked when you have like shareable Google Docs.
Great, Good advice.
Yeah, thank you. Good job.
Few things. Are there other questions? I have a few. One, thanks for adding the link to the tool in the chat. That was helpful. I'm also just curious about who's using it. And you said it's hard to track the data around who's using it. That feels like a very important thing to do to try to get a sense of it. Because I was thinking about who in the activists in the community, but also municipalities and how they might see this as a useful tool in the counties. I was also thinking about our planning departments and curious about what kind of conversations you've had. I know that Director Checkley is on the line. I'm not sure if Acting Director Stern is on the line as well, but what kind of, if any...
I am.
You are, okay. Because I'm actually curious about both of your thoughts or responses around this, and if this is something that merits some kind of further conversation. Is this something that could be useful for our planning departments in some way beyond what's already happening? So I guess the question is more directed to Director Checkley and Acting Director Stern.
Sure. Before they respond, just on the tracking, we thought about this. Our web infrastructure is not the latest and greatest. We can track how many hits we're getting on certain pages, but we don't have a way to track who those people are or necessarily where they are.
Okay.
And I'm not a web expert, so I would not know how to do that. I mean, I guess the way to do that would be to make the tool require like a sign in or a sign up, right? And then you can get people's emails, and that could be a way that you figure out who's using it,
Right.
at least signing.
Thank you.
So I can go ahead and start.
Yeah.
Sure. Tanya Stern, Acting Planning Director with the Montgomery County Planning Department. Just wanted to note first that our department works on a regular basis with the National Center for Smart Growth at the University of Maryland, Nick Finio and Garrett Knapp. We worked with them to put together and co-host the Makeover Montgomery 5 conference that took place this September. And we also employ contractors that we partner with the National Center for Smart Growth to help supplement our staff capacities. With regards to this particular tool, I think that this is a really fascinating tool, and definitely applaud the center for looking at how we can make our plans more interactive and more useful, and to sort of make the data much more accessible for anyone to be able to access. I was definitely listening very closely to the conversation, and I think as Nick, pointed out, this is a way. This is not only a tool to help support stakeholders who are interested in a Purple Line corridor, but also a way to advance the practice of developing these types of tools to make information from plans much more accessible. I think in terms of next steps within our department, we can certainly continue to have conversations with the National Center team on this tool. But I was also thinking more from a practical perspective, and thinking about the comments that Commissioner Presley made in terms of how we can use a tool like this to track implementation of recommended public facilities in bike lanes. I'm sorry, in master plans such as bike lanes, and other types of public amenities. And I think the key thing is, how can we develop a tool that can be maintained and updated by the departments over a period of years, because it takes years to implement recommendations for master plans. But it does give me a lot of food for thought. And I'm definitely planning on, talking with our GIS team and others to see if we could look to, modify or even create our own version of a tool like this that we could use internally and externally.
Thank you.
Well, I don't have anything to add after that. I think that Tanya has covered everything. And I know that we are very much interested in this because we have lots and lots of layers on our GIS program, and this would certainly add to that. And we will be in touch also. And of course, the two planning departments, we work together a lot in maintaining this information. So we're on board too.
Thank you. Thanks for both of you for the comments. I was also curious, maybe I'm getting too expansive with this, but has there been any conversations with the Council of Governments? Because one of the things, obviously, that's so useful about this tool is that it crosses jurisdictions. And so I don't know if any conversations you've had with COG.
We started small. So we stuck to Montgomery and Prince George's because once we got started in a number of plans, a number of regulations, and we didn't get them all just in those two places, right? the amount of effort there. But you're totally right. Getting COG, you could definitely think of building this at a regional level. I think would be a very useful tool. So.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. Any further questions, commissioners, for Mr. Finio on this? Dr. Finio, I imagine I should be saying.
Yes, thanks.
None. Thank you very much for the presentation, and we look forward to continued conversations about this. Thank you very much.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Next, commissioners, we are going to be going into executive session. I would look for a motion to go into executive session pursuant to Maryland General Provision Article of the Annotated Code of Maryland, Section 3-305B9. The closed session would be proposed to consult with counsel to consider matters that relate to negotiation with the Fraternal Order of Police Collective Bargaining Unit. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
A question. Will we return to open session after this, or are we ending our meeting after the closed session?
We will return to open meeting after this, but we will only return to open meeting, to see if there's any further business before us, but mostly to just close the open meeting. So I heard a motion. Was that Commissioner Giraldo made the motion?
Yes, it was.
And do we have a second?
Seconded.
I heard a second. I didn't see who did it. If you could let me know.
Cherie Branson.
Thank you, Commissioner Branson. So we have a motion by Commissioner Dorner, by Commissioner Giraldo, a second by Commissioner Branson. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I will ask Mr. Adams to call the roll.
Chair Shapiro.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Washington.
Commissioner Washington is left.
Thank you. Vice Chair Zients.
Aye.
Commissioner Branson.
Aye.
Commissioner Hill.
Aye.
Commissioner Panera.
Aye.
Commissioner Presley.
Aye.
That is 9-0. Thank you.
Thank you. So we will go into closed session. The time is 11:22. It'll take us a few minutes to get there and set up. And maybe we need a quick bio break or something. So let's go we'll start up the executive session at 11:35. Okay? The closed session. And then we will go back into open session very briefly after the closed session. So we'll see you all in closed session at 11:35.
Hello.
session, and there's no further business before us. So without objection, folks, we are adjourned.
We don't need a motion to go back into open session to close?
We closed in closed session.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I just
Okay.
want to take a moment to wish everyone a very happy holiday season and a really blessed new year. So thank you all and stay
Thank you,
safe. And
Amy.
Thank you.
Jeff, get well quickly.
Back to you, Amy.
Thank you.
I agree. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. I'm
Happy
sorry I
Hanukkah.
can't be a
Happy
better
Kwanzaa.
host
Happy
today.
Kwanzaa. Yeah.
See ya.
That's all right. Happy
Okay.
holidays, everybody.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Okay.
Be
Bye
well.
bye.